o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. U.S. Marshals shoot and kill a man following a high-speed chase on Interstate 90. It all happened this morning between Columbus and Reed Point. Chief Deputy Timothy Hornung says leading up to the gunfire, the U.S. Marshals Montana Violent Offenders Task Force was seeking a fugitive from Georgia. The Montana Highway Patrol tried to pull the driver over outside Laurel, but he took off on a 35-mile pursuit down the interstate. After the suspect hit two separate spike strips, the Montana Highway Patrol finally forced him off the road with a pit maneuver just west of Columbus. At that point, authorities say the suspect walked away from the scene, turned toward law enforcement and pulled out a gun. He ignored commands to surrender, and two deputy marshals shot the man multiple times. No one else was injured. The Montana Department of Justice Division of Criminal Investigations is investigating the incident. Well, new details have emerged in a mass shooting that left 10 dead in Colorado, an incident that came less than a week after 8 people were fatally shot in Georgia. Danya Backus has more tonight.
Police have identified the victims of Monday's mass shooting at a Boulder, Colorado supermarket.
Our hearts go out to all the victims killed during this senseless act of violence.
3 were employees of the King Superstore. Another was among the initial first responders at the scene. Officer Eric Talley was an 11-year police veteran and the father of 7 children.
We can never thank Officer Talley or his family enough for their sacrifice, but we will not forget it.
Investigators also announced the name of the alleged gunman.
This suspect has been identified as Ahmad Alyssa, 21 of Arvada. He has been charged with 10 counts of murder in the first degree.
According to court documents, the 21-year-old bought an AR-556 pistol 6 days before the shootings. President Biden called on Congress to ban assault weapons and large-capacity magazines.
It was law for the longest time, and it brought down these mass killings. We should do it again.
The federal assault weapons ban expired in September 2004 after being on the books for a decade. Danya Backus, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Police have not suggested a motive for the Boulder shootings. The suspect's relatives are said to have told investigators they believe he suffered from some kind of mental illness. Today, the U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments in a Montana case that centers around the authority or lack of it that tribal police have on reservations when stopping non-Indians. Wyoming resident Joshua Cooley was arrested and eventually indicted on meth charges after a stop on the Crow Reservation back in 2016. Cooley argued that the Crow tribal officer was not allowed to detain him because Cooley is not Native American and doesn't have tribal status. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed, throwing out evidence against Cooley. Well, today the Supreme Court heard the Justice Department's appeal of that lower court ruling. Several justices questioned and suggested that the Ninth Circuit went too far in limiting tribal police. A decision in the case is expected in late June. Montana's U.S. senators are backing a bill to give legal, medical, and recreational marijuana businesses in the state access to banking. Senator Steve Daines is the lead Republican sponsor of the Safe Banking Act, which was introduced today. Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon is the lead Democratic sponsor, and Senator John Tester is a co-sponsor. Typically, cannabis businesses are not able to use banks or credit unions because marijuana is still illegal under federal law, meaning much of the industry operates in cash. The Safe Banking Act would prevent federal regulators from taking action against banks that work with marijuana businesses that are following their state laws. In Montana, after the passage of Initiative 190, that would include medical and recreational sellers. Or I-90, I should say. Senator Daines said that the Montana businesses should not have to operate strictly on cash, saying this bill will, quote, provide needed certainty for legal Montana cannabis businesses and give them the ability to freely use banks, credit unions, and other financial institutions without the fear of punishment. Senator Tester's office tells MTN that forcing these businesses to operate in cash raises public safety concerns, and that is why he, quote, believes that banking institutions should be allowed to provide services to legitimate Montana businesses. Well, today, Republicans in the state Senate advanced a bill that would eliminate Election Day voter registration in Montana, putting it one step closer to final passage. MTN's chief political reporter Mike Dennison took a closer look at just how many people register to vote on Election Day in Montana and where those people are. Here's what he found out.
Since Election Day registration took effect in Montana in 2006,
The number of people taking advantage of this opportunity has steadily increased. In 2006, 4,351 people registered to vote on General Election Day, about 1% of the overall votes cast. By the 2016 presidential election, the amount hit a high of 12,055 voters, or 2.3% of the overall votes. We don't have the numbers from the 2020 general election because Secretary of State Christy Jacobson's office has not provided them, despite several requests from MTN News. However, since 2020 was mostly an all-mail ballot, those numbers aren't that comparable to previous elections. We also looked at some individual counties to see where Election Day registration is above or below average. Counties with mostly above-average registration on Election Day have been Missoula, Silver Bow, Cascade, and some with high Native American populations like Glacier, Hill, Bighorn, Lake, and Roosevelt. Larger counties often with below-average registration on Election Day are Gallatin, Lewis and Clark, Yellowstone, Ravalli, and Flathead. Missoula County Election Administrator Bradley Seaman, who supports Election Day registration, says it's not the ideal option for voters, but it's a service Montana should provide. He also notes that sometimes as many as half the people registering on Election Day are not new voters, but just changing their address from a different county or precinct. The bill's sponsor, Republican Representative Sharon Grieve of Florence, says she doesn't see the bill as eliminating the votes of those registering Election Day. She says if people care enough to vote, they should care enough to register by the Monday before Election Day. But Representative Tyson Running Wolf of Browning says the change will harm Native American communities by changing the rules, again, on people for whom voting is often unfamiliar.
Sometimes they say, oh, it's so easy to vote. Yeah, but not where I come from. You know, it's one way, 45 miles. You're going to have to register, and then you're going to have to go run down there and vote, drop off your mail. There's all these different barriers that sit there in Indian country that are not even associated, like I'd say, on the outside world.
At this point, however, the bill looks like a done deal. And Election Day voter registration in Montana likely will be gone this year. Reporter from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
And you can see Mike's full report on Election Day voter registration on our website, ktvq.com. All right, turning to Chief Meteorologist Ed McIntosh. Ed, we've got a little over a week left in March, but you're gazing into the future a bit tonight and looking ahead to April.
That's right, yeah, but we're going to be looking at what looks to be warmer than average temperatures, not only across most of Montana, but only the Pacific Northwest is the only part of the country where it doesn't look like it's going to trend a little warmer than it typically would, and drier than average to the south and much of the Rocky Mountain West through Wyoming, and also the extreme southern edge of Montana, but no major influence across the rest of the state, which means we have equal chances of average, above average, or below average. So what is average? Mid-50s for the highs, mid-30s for the lows in the Billings area. It's actually the third wettest month, including the third snowiest. We usually get a little over 1.5 inches in rain and over 8 inches in snow. So far this month, we've only had a trace of snow. Back with more on the forecast coming up.
All right, thank you, Ed. The school year isn't quite yet over for Billings students, but administrators are already hard at work crafting schedules for next year. Today, Billings School Superintendent Greg Upham gave an update on block scheduling, summer school, and high school graduation. Q2's Mitch Leahy joins us now with more.
After a year of learning underneath the cloud of the COVID-19 pandemic, details are finally starting to emerge about the 2021-22 school year. But first, let's talk high school graduation. The tentative plan now is to have students graduate inside the Metro Park First Interstate Arena, and each student will be allowed 6 guests to come and watch. Students will be required to wear masks. As far as next year goes, administrators are considering keeping some form of block scheduling for middle and high school students. The district had an opportunity to try out a form of block scheduling this year during the pandemic, with high school students alternating half their classes week to week and middle school students alternating every other day. Billings School District 2 Superintendent Greg Upham said he's heard the pros and cons of block scheduling from teachers and parents. On the good side, it offers kids more attention to one class, calms down the school buildings with less classroom transition, and allows more time for kids to make it to the Career Center. On the downside, some think 2 hours in one class is too long, and student attention may be lost. A survey is out now to teachers and students to gain feedback about block scheduling. Upham said so far, everyone seems to be about split down the middle.
We got a good return on it. You know, the high schools, it was about 60-40 in favor of some form of block. And I know that they're there are a lot of versions of block scheduling. And then in the middle school, not quite, almost inverted, 57% in favor of 6-period, 43 of block. But theirs is a little bit different from the high school. So, we take all that into consideration moving forward. But yeah, we have a good survey to at least judge it.
If a block schedule does end up happening next year, Upham said its effectiveness will be evaluated on a regular basis. There's nothing stopping the school district from switching back to a 6-period day sometime in the future. The district hopes to roll out final information on the school schedules sometime in April. Reporting in Billings, Mitch Laggy, MTN News.
Thanks, Mitch. And another sign of normal at the Billings schools, volunteers and foster grandparents have been allowed back into the classrooms to help students, and in-town field trips and guest speakers have also started back up. Well, Yellowstone County health officials are leading the way and are opening COVID-19 vaccines to all residents 16 and older. This is ahead of Governor Gianforte's timeline, which is vaccinations opening up to everyone across the state on April 1st. Now, the reason for the change is to make sure that no doses go unused, but Riverstone health officials caution we're not yet in the clear. The state reports there are nearly 128,000 Yellowstone County residents now eligible. So far, only 20% are immunized. Officials say 70 to 85% of residents need to be immunized to protect the community. Until those roughly 110,000 people are fully vaccinated, Riverstone Health warns we still need to take precautions. Well, still to come on the MTN 10 o'clock news here on Q2. It's not just fans going crazy over March Madness. How the tourney is giving Sportsbet Montana a lot to cheer about this year. And going, gone. We're going to introduce you to the MSUB Yellow Jackets' new home run king a little later in sports.
From Montana's news leader,